Hello and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Tonight we are joined by returning guest Evie Bloom.
Hi.
Excuse me. Welcome to the room, Evie. How are you this evening?
I'm doing okay. You know what? I think last time we talked I had a cold, and I think this time we're talking I have a cold, so I'm here with my tea.
Oh, I fully understand. I had a booster yesterday, so although it's technically not a cold, I spent a greatest portion of yesterday and today sleeping.
I know. So we are all here, mostly.
Yeah,
But
mostly. I'm
yeah,
telling you, this one's kicking my butt. The prior, what was it? Prior two or three, I was fine, but this one is like,
yeah.
man.
All right. Well,
So now, as most people might understand from our familiarity, you've been on the program before.
yeah.
And the last time you were with us, you had just published a book called Ship It.
hmm
And I believe that this has now become an Audible. Am I correct?
Yeah. Over the last couple of months, I worked with a narrator, Amelia Cameron, to record, yeah, to do an audiobook for Ship It, which is pretty exciting for me.
Nice. So now tell me, can you elaborate a little bit on how the process went for you?
I was completely clueless about all of this, like most of the things I do when it comes to indie publishing. But it's a learning process, and there are definitely some resources out there. So ultimately, I went with something called ACX. I think it stands for Audiobook Exchange, and it's a really great platform and resource for narrators to offer their services, and for authors who are looking for great voice artists and narrators to find someone who they want to work with. Basically, there's a whole auditioning process. Like from the side of the an author, you need to you can search for people specifically, or you can kind of put a proposal out there and see who answers you. I thought it might take a while actually to find somebody, but I was really lucky and found Amelia pretty quickly. She sent in an audition. She's not the only person who sent in an audition. I had some quite funny people send in auditions. Some were AI, some were um, not very professional at all, but she has a beautiful voice, and it was great quality. It was clear to me that I wanted to work with her. And yeah, so we started recording. I say we, right? Like she did all the hard work. all the We'll say this, that the hard work by me was done before the audiobook portion, and then she
Right.
took it up after that. And it was actually really great working with her. I think she's relatively new at narration, but you couldn't
Mhm.
tell. She was super professional, and I know it's really hard work. They say, I think, to record an audiobook, it's something like 6 hours of work for every hour recorded. So, like, if you have a 10-hour book, it's like 60 hours of
Oh,
work or something. Yeah.
yes.
She put in a
Yes.
ton of work, and
OMG,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. You probably know, right? There's editing and production and all that hard stuff.
Yes.
Um,
There's a lot more than people understand.
yeah.
Typically, there even for myself, it's probably easier for myself, and for those people who don't know who are listening in, not to take it away from Evie, because I wanna hear about your entire story and adventure, because every process is a little bit different.
hmm
But as far as mine, um, for right now, because I'm not putting myself out there to be hired yet, although that's the
hmm
plan. After my books are all done, I want my books done so I have that experience, that hands-on
Yeah.
experience.
hmm
But for me, because I am the author of the
hmm
books, I'm already like, I already know where the inflection and
Mm.
where the emphasis on
So you'll
words.
you'll you'll have a more challenging time than I did, because I didn't know. I'm not a big audiobook listener, so therefore I didn't have, like, I think, super strong opinions about these things. But certainly for, since you're kind of in the biz, you'll have feelings about you know. Yeah, I think there's so much prep work, and I think that she did a great job asking me questions. I mean, there are things when you're recording that you have to think about that you don't when you're just, I mean, when you're just publishing it, either for Kindle or paperback or whatever. Luckily, you don't have to worry about the formatting as much, right? But she had to ask questions like, so you said OMG, right? That's so funny because
Mhm.
OMG in my books, there are a lot of text messages. Surely someone says OMG or
Yes.
writes that. And she's like, okay, I guess do we say, oh my God? Do we say OMG? Or all just sorts of
Right.
silly technical things that you never think about when you're writing that, someone who's narrating it, saying it out loud has to really consider. Um, so yeah, it was fun. She had a lot of great questions, and I was lucky to. I think it's so important to find somebody that you feel you can work with smoothly, and there's a good rapport there because they're bringing your work to life. And um, when you publish something like not audio, but just a regular, I guess, visual reading book,
Mhm.
you never really know how it's coming across in people's heads. I mean, you might be able to have a conversation with somebody here or there, or see the review afterwards, but um, they're like an additional creator of your work. Like they come in, they're a
Oh,
partner,
yes.
and you get to see like how they interpreted it, and you want it,
Mhm.
of course, portrayed closely enough, I think, to your intention as the writer, to other people who will be listening. But it was a great learning experience for sure.
Oh, yeah. So now, what we know you have the next book, and don't get too far into the next book because I wanna take a minute. But since you have a next book in the series, are you thinking about carrying on, the experience with, I think you said her name was Miss Cameron?
Yeah, Amelia. I'm sorry. What did you ask? If what about the experience?
If you were gonna continue with having her as your narrator for your next book.
I mean, we'll see. I think for right now, I'm trying to like just so pitch it, the sequel. I won't get too far into it. Came out yesterday. I feel like I
Okay.
gotta I gotta like process all that, first before I see, okay, am I gonna do an audiobook for pitch it? I mean, probably eventually.
Right.
But I feel like I gotta kind of get over the hump of that initial release. And then,
Right.
I'll see
Well
where we take it from there.
well, the reason I ask is simply if you're
Hmm.
carrying on your characters. Like I had a book,
Yeah.
it was my very first Audible, and I had hired an actor to do that one. I
Hmm.
had 2 contracts for two separate books, my
Hmm.
sci-fi, but that contract fell through because
Hmm.
of conflicting assignments that the author had,
Hmm.
not the author, excuse me, that would be me, the narrator had to undergo. So one of those fell through. And because
Mm,
the other one no longer narrates books, I couldn't
mm.
have her narrate the next in the series that I had hired her for. So,
Got it.
because I wanted I wanted the
The continuity.
consistency of the
Yeah.
same
Mhm.
voice. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to go through ACX, which is who I have carry my books as well.
Okay.
I had them take down the
Mm,
prior book, so now
mhm.
that one has to be redone by yours
Yeah.
truly. So,
Yeah.
that's why I asked if you had
Yeah.
put as much of as a forethought into that.
I actually haven't even thought about it. It's like everything's been kind of a whirlwind. I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking when I was like, "Hey, let's do the audiobook for Ship It and also do the release for the sequel all within the same few weeks." Like it was a lot. Even though like I said, the Amelia did most of the hard work, but like when as when you're writing and releasing everything, the writing's only part of it, right? Then you've got editing, and then you've got formatting, then you've got marketing, and the planning of the release and everything, and the follow up after that. There's a lot to be done, so I actually haven't even gotten there. It's kind of like it's like one of those things on my to-do list. I'll get there when I get there.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I get what you're saying. So now let's go back. So now
Yeah.
you have a new book, like we referred
Yeah.
to, and this is a continuation of the series, yes?
Yes. It is a
Awesome.
continuation. So I always say, like, I actually feel it could be read as a standalone if somebody doesn't feel like going and reading the first one. There's enough taking place in there, and then I think I think I give enough context. Like it's not wholly dependent on having knowledge from the first book, but I do encourage people to either read Ship It, or now you can listen to it on audiobook, before,
Nice,
yeah.
nice
Yeah.
pitch.
I practiced. Um, yeah, to before jumping into pitch it. I think it'll be fun. I think it has an interesting start, let's say, to pitch it, and I think if you already have like a sort of connection to the characters from Ship It, then you will you'll enjoy yeah, enjoy is a good word. I say that because there's some interesting things that happen in pitch it that people have great big feelings about, but I always promise them, you might be a little bit annoyed at me as the author in the beginning, but you're gonna love me by the end. So I think if you come into it already with that connection to the main characters, Nathan and Sarah, then you'll enjoy Pitch It even more. Um, and yeah, I really enjoyed writing Pitch It because so when I finished writing Ship It and people read it and a lot of people liked it and they were like, "Oh, these characters are so lovely," but like you left an opening for a they would ask me, "Are you gonna write a sequel?" Because you kinda left an opening there for, like, what could happen in their future, and so
Mhm.
then they said, "Well, what's gonna happen?" And I was like, "Well, that's a very good question," and so I kind of explored that myself, and it was actually even in while I think Ship It was, like, kind of in final editing phases that I began writing the sequel, um, and I wasn't committed or anything, but I just felt like, wouldn't this be fun if I tried some things, kind of turn things on their heads in the second book. And I think a lot of romances they explore kind of like that point up to the happily ever after.
Right.
Um, and you don't necessarily know what happens after. Maybe if it's some sort of series or, a group of books that go together, not, I don't know, they're not necessarily always about the same couple, but you hear from those couples in other books, like, I don't know, The
Yeah.
Deal, like Elle Kennedy, or I don't know, like the Miles High series or something. Like you hear about the couple that's the focus of one book in other books. Um, but yeah, so I wanted to you know, find out what happens with these characters. And it's funny because the way it started out wasn't I think always as writing, like you start out with one idea and you get feedback from other people or you just get ideas, in the middle of the night in the shower while driving, whatever, that end up making it into your book. And yeah, but like I said, I was able to explore kind of what happens after that happily ever after, or is it? And then you also get to um and I think learn a lot more about some of the loved beloved side characters, um,
Right.
like their best friends and work friends and that type of thing that a lot of people kind of caught into. They really like them and they were like, oh, I really like that person's sense of humor. So maybe I tried to play that up a little bit in the second book. And
Right.
yeah.
So let me now some people would say that it's harder with a romance in the second take, you know what I mean, the
Mm,
second book, simply
yeah.
because most people want the heat and the chemistry. Do
Mhm.
you find that that was harder to keep in place into the second book?
Well, I have to figure out how to answer this without providing spoilers. There's plenty of heat in the second book, I will say.
Mhm.
I think actually, possibly even more. um, and it's because, yeah, how let's see. I'll say this. We got to the heat happens much more quickly in the second book, and it's funny because I thought, is that too early?" And then I like went back and read one of my favorite series is the Outlander series, and then I read I think it's in the second book of the Outlander series that I think the first scene, in fact, is like one of these scenes, and I'm like, okay, well, it's not on the first page, so the precedent's been set there. It's not too early. So there is that. I mean, you do kind of see, um, how their relationship is going. Like it starts basically immediately after the first book ends, chronologically. But then they encounter difficulties, as often happens in a once people move past their honeymoon period. And I don't know. One of my big things as a writer is trying to write realistic stories. Not to say
Mhm.
that I've experienced everything that I write, but things that could actually happen in real life. And I've been in a loving relationship for very many years, and sometimes things are great, and sometimes things are challenging. And I think that people kind of like to see couples maybe encounter challenges, realistic ones, and then
Mhm.
see how and if they can overcome those. I think it can be not that I set out to inspire people, but it can be a bit inspirational, can make you feel like, okay, like maybe I'm in a relationship and sometimes we fight or sometimes we have issues and I'm not the only one, it happens. It's a universal
Right.
human experience. Yeah.
Now, when with the romance, do you have do you know how, like, some books have the mystery, like, oh, they love
Hmm.
each other, but they're still solving a mystery or with each
Mm,
series. What do you have as far as your surrounding? Is it just based on the couple's reactions to each other and their own chemistry and their own life
mm.
together, or are there outside stories going along too that drive the story along farther?
Yeah, so there is an element of mystery, but it's not. I don't think it's the kind that you're referring to. So, like, they're not trying to solve a mystery together. However, the reader might be solving a bit of a mystery. There's a bit more intrigue in this book than the first.
Mhm.
And that's because I pull in, so it's primarily dual point of view. But then there's a sort of third, what I call encrypted point of view, meaning unknown, like who it's from, which sort of adds an element of mystery. I think what drives, so something that interests me as a woman, like as a professional in Silicon Valley, is always like sort of um, career, like not only for women, of course, but just like sort of people who are like trying to do multiple things in their life at once, right? Like we're never just
Mhm.
focused on like our romantic relationship or just focused on work. Hopefully, like we have a lot of different things going on, and so that's sort of trying to figure out how do we balance those things. So, like in Pitch It, both Nathan and Sarah are moving forward professionally and trying to go after goals that they have. At the same time, they've just fallen in love, but suddenly something comes in to like something or someone, for example, comes in
Mhm.
that challenges what, their relationship, their connection. And people might have their own emotional or mental state that they're also contending with as they just go through life. And like, I think I try to ask the questions here, like, what happens? How do we support each other when those things happen? What are the bad things that can happen or break down? Um, so I think really here it's there's kind of a few different paths moving forward at once, and it really has to do with the couple's relationship, and then also just sort of like as they develop professionally in their workplaces.
That's interesting. So, with a few books now under your belt, can you tell us a few things that you've figured out or still struggled with as a writer?
Yeah, so um, sometimes, you write something and you feel really connected to it, right? And either alpha or beta readers or your editor um, might tell you, this just isn't really working for me.
Right.
So, I mean, that's something that it's hard. I've actually been an editor myself, so I've learned with time that like, so first of all, you always have your kind of pile. There's like this doc I have. Of course, I think most writers have something like that. They were like, "Well, I'm not going to use it today, but who knows? maybe in a year or maybe later." So, just like really getting rid of stuff that's not working. One thing I struggle with is I can always say more. So, like, I think at some point this manuscript for Pitch It was up to like 115,000 words, and I was like, "Okay, nobody wants to read that much about these people." So really just determining, I had a hard time, and thank goodness I have this wonderful editor. Her name is Jen Bowles. She's also an author. Um, Help me um, figure out, okay, like, am I cutting? What do I cut? Do I cut entire scenes? Do I cut subplots? Like, do I cut, or do I just try and shrink, you know what I mean, everything into less
Mhm.
words? It's hard. Uh, so that is definitely something I struggle with. I struggled a bit with it in Pitch It. Also, this work in progress I have going is way too wordy. So, yeah, say less, Becky. Say less.
That kinda takes me that I'm gonna skip ahead a couple questions. So
Yeah.
so mentioning your newest work, what
Mhm.
do you have planned for, 2024 as far as your writing?
Yeah, so thank you so much for being gracious and asking me for 2024 and not mentioning that I had originally promised to have something out another something out in 2023. No, I was really trying to get out this sort of like Hanukkah Jewish rom-com book out by this Hanukkah, which is in December, but it's not happening. So my goal is that to continue to work on that. And to get it in a good place. I'm hoping in the next month or two to maybe get it out to some early readers, see if they like these characters as much as I do. I think they're very endearing, and just see like it's a very different kind of story because my first two books, each of them take place over maximum like 6 months long, something like that,
Mhm,
like the time frame. And this is something, it's more of a childhood friend. They become romantic partners, so it takes place over many many years, which is something I haven't attempted before. So that's a real learning process as well, and I'm trying to read just different books that can maybe teach me how other people might have done it, and see if that's something I
Mhm.
want to try and do, or if I want to take a different tack. But yeah, so that'll be.
I think
I changed the title. The working title of it changes like every few days, so I won't tell you what it's called.
right.
But
I think that's the basic mentioning what you said about reading, and
hmm
I think that's the big drive as an author.
hmm
It's the reading because you obviously have a passion for books and reading prior to
mm,
writing. Because if you
yeah,
don't, there's not that draw to tell your own story.
yeah,
Reading others, and that is the best way to teach yourself is to continue to read and
yeah,
read in abundance. I
for sure.
often, oh, hold on, that's my timer. We've hit our 20 minutes, but that's fine. Um, hold on. There we go. Anyways, sorry, I should have warned you about that.
Yeah, I was
Come
like,
f
oh my
I
god, evacuate!
yeah,
There's a fire.
I know. I have headsets on, so it doesn't bother me as much, even though I'm in this small space. Anyway, so reading really does help bring that. Oftentimes when I listen to books, I'm a big Audible buff. I love
Yeah,
having the Audibles because I can clean the house, I can cook dinner, I can, you know what I
yeah,
mean, walk my laps, do my yoga and have
hmm
headsets on or listen to it on speakers
yeah,
so that I'm not tied, you know what I mean?
hmm
And as I've gotten older, my eyes just doesn't really like looking at the page too often.
I know.
But
I noticed I have to
anyways,
turn my computer brighter every day. Like, it's too
oh
dark.
my gosh, right? Or wear those blue glasses for the
Yeah,
screen giving you a headache because you've been sitting there too long. Yeah, I fully
yeah.
understand. So, I really enjoyed having you on, and this like I said, this was your second time, so hopefully when, 2024 hits and you get your next one ready to get out, you can come back on and we can talk some more because I'd love to dive a little deeper, hitting your 3rd book. Plus, this one you said you've been working on for a little while, so I would love to hit that too about how you've learned from the
Yeah,
prior 2.
for sure,
But
for
don't
sure.
answer
That's
me yet.
yeah,
Don't answer me yet. Put a pin in that for the next podcast, okay?
yeah. All right,
Well,
awesome. Well,
thank
it
you
was great.
it was great having you on, and as for our listeners, we've entered that little bit of time where I bring on our Amazon deal of the day. And as we're hitting the holidays, I don't know about you guys, but I'm always looking, driving my bankrupt butt to the stores. But anyways, or online stores, as I may say. Anyways, today is the Ninja Possible Cooker. It's a Pro 8.5 quart multi cooker with 8-in-1 slow cooker and Dutch oven steamer and more. It's down 33% from its previous price at $149.99, leaving us with this great steal of $99.95. So, if you're interested in a great gift or you just need something extra for the kitchen, I'll have the link in the bio, guys. Thank you again, once again, Evie. You are always a pleasure.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you
you
to our
very much, Eric.
listeners. Oh, you're welcome, hon. Anytime you want to come back. Thank you to our listeners. Until next time, guys. Bye bye for now.